Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens with our team of dedicated journalists across the UK. We're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good evening. These are your top stories from the GB Newsroom. 9 arrests were made during a pro-Palestine rally through central London today. The arrests were made for alleged offences, including inciting racial hatred, a suspected racially aggravated public order offence and on suspicion of supporting a proscribed organisation. Thousands of people turned out, calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. 1,700 police officers were also deployed onto the streets of the capital. The Foreign Secretary has warned Britain is ready to strike the Houthi rebels again if attacks on the Red Sea continue. Writing in the Sunday Telegraph, Lord Cameron says the government has sent an unambiguous message to the Houthis saying their attacks have to stop. He also warned the Iran-backed militants could force up prices in Britain if they're allowed to block the passage of container ships in the busy trade route. Yemen's Houthi rebels earlier promised a strong and effective response following a fresh strike by the United States last night. The US says it was a follow-up to a joint UK mission targeting Houthi positions following a spate of recent attacks. A former postmistress who's planning to run against Sarah Davey at the next general election says he must be brought to justice. The Lib Dem leader was the Postal Affairs Minister during the Horizon IT scandal, but has refused to apologise or take any accountability for his inaction. Hundreds of staff were wrongly prosecuted after faulty software led to shortfalls in sub-postmasters' accounts. Sir Ed says he was lied to by the Post Office on an industrial scale. Speaking exclusively to GB News, Yvonne Tracy says she felt compelled to take a stand.
I would have loved it if we could have got a sub-postmaster who'd been affected by this to stand against Ed Davey, but I can understand that probably their confidence is not, and they probably are fed up to death with the government, etc. So I thought, it's going to be me. I'm reluctantly doing it, but I feel I have to do something, and this is all I can do. I think he should be brought to account.
Around 150 migrants have been intercepted in the English Channel, ending the extended pause in crossings. On board 3 small boats, they're the first to make the treacherous journey since the 16th of December, the longest period without any migrant arrivals for almost 4 years. It's thought bad weather conditions may have prevented more people from crossing the Channel over the past few weeks. And finally, a League One football match had to be abandoned today after around 1,000 Reading home fans invaded the pitch. The start of the game was interrupted for 3 minutes when tennis balls were thrown onto the pitch. The referee then had to take the players off after just 16 minutes as home fans took to the field, with some letting off flares. Many Reading supporters want the owner to sell the club, which is currently 4th from the bottom in the 3rd tier following sanctions imposed on them by the EFL. Those are your top stories on GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by simply saying Play GB News. Now it's over to headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. Tonight I'm joined by Paul Cox and Lewis Schaefer. Good evening, gentlemen. Are you both well?
I am, thank you, Simon.
Excellent.
I can't speak for Lewis. I mean,
I'm not well. I'm 20 days into a you'd call it a lurgy in this country.
Oh, are you ill?
Well, I'm not feeling that well. I was completely run down over Christmas time, and I'm still run down. I don't believe it's a virus or a bacteria. Anything.
But that's hard to reconcile with your superb diet and all the measures you've taken in order to.
I know.
An anomaly, I'd imagine.
But you know what? For the sake of honesty out there, that even people who eat an all-meat diet can catch a little bit of something.
I'm going to have to go back to my files. Make some adjustments. Let's take a look at Sunday's front pages. I don't know whether Lewis's lurgy will have made it onto the front pages, but anyway, Mail on Sunday. Farce of gangster gunman. We can't deport. That could relate to Lewis, but probably not. The Sunday Times. Venables, the villain of the hour. In fact, it's an anagram for villain, isn't it, if you've got a weird accent. Given CBE despite Horizon fears. That's historical CBE, of course, not coming up. The Sunday Telegraph. UK ready to strike Houthis again, says Cameron. Just says image on the screen there, but I don't think that is their front page. Observer. Red Sea crisis could shatter economic recovery hopes. And the Sunday Express has Minister jail post office bullies, and Sharon Osbourne then looking fetching in pinstripes. And finally, the Daily Star Sunday edition has brace yourself for the big freeze. Apparently a northern beast is on its way, and the cold weather we've had the last few days has just been a trailer for that. Well, those were your front pages. I was going to say that the cold weather is just warming us up, and then I realised that didn't make any sense. I had to change tack in mid-sentence. We begin, however, with the Observer, Paul.
We do. Red Sea crisis could shatter hopes of global economic recovery. So World Bank warns of surging energy prices, slower growth and higher inflation as threat rises of disruption to world trade. So this is ahead of the statement we're expecting in the Commons from Rishi Sunak on Monday with regards to the attacks from the UK and US on the Houthi rebel sites in Yemen. For me, however, this is the World Bank. There's a little bit of political gamesmanship, a little bit of hypothesising in their favour, because, of course, there are two sides to this story. One side is you just let the Houthi rebels continue to hijack and pirate ships in the Suez Canal or in that part of the world, where, of course, a lot of our imports and exports come through. And this isn't just food or, bits that you've ordered on TikTok. There's medical supplies and everything comes through there. So, for me, they're being sort of willfully ignorant about this, because if we were just to leave it, we'd have a problem anyway. So our choice is whether we defend the area or not, and I think the only way to mitigate the risk is to defend it. And of course, it is very political and it's dangerous because they're linked to Iran and Iran's linked to Israel, and at the end of the day, the target is Israel. But what do? You can't just stand back and be passive. I don't believe.
No. Well, the Houthis have made it fairly clear that this is that their attitude to Israel is as belligerent as it could possibly be, isn't it? They're not claiming any kind of localised dispute.
No, there's a big dispute. It's not just about the Houthis. It's, from what I know, it's about the Iranians. And what happened here is the way we have decided to punish the Houthis is by telling them we're going to attack them, and gave them a few days or a week's notice. for the Iranians to leave the area and for even the Houthis to leave the area, and then we destroy some Houthi stuff, which is very similar to what the Israelis did to Gaza.
Yeah.
And that's sort of like what we do, is we just destroy stuff when we should be doing.
You think you would rather see it would be a strike without warning, and you would like to see there be more loss of life in order to demonstrate real purpose?
That's a good point. That's what you were saying, Lewis.
It is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I am saying, I don't care about the loss of life. What I would do is I would say that Yemen there can be no shipping around Yemen unless it's authorized by. Unless it's.
But you can only manage that. I mean, I guess I know what you're trying to say.
I'm trying to say
because I've worked with you enough.
Yeah.
But, the idea is that I think you're trying to say is that you should police that water, and therefore Houthi rebels shouldn't be able to sail their boats and be pirates.
Yeah, anybody.
The only way you can do that is with a military.
Yeah. Well, the American gunships and British gunships and so on are getting involved.
So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
They go in the straits there, and they say we will not allow any Yemeni ships.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair enough. I understand what you're saying, finally. And Emma Raducanu is doing a training session, by the way, as well. Paul, did you look at that?
I didn't, actually, but that's a really good point. I was completely focused on the... So she's been injured for a while, hasn't she?
Well, she had, because she was our Golden Girl about 2 years ago, wasn't she?
She won the American Open. A bit of a surprise, the American Open in your... Yeah.
And then immediately retired, a bit like an Ascot winner or something. I thought that was it. She was retired to stud. But no, in fact, she's back.
And we obviously highlighted her to great heights that she could never maintain because she was unlucky enough to win something major in the first year of her career. So
I think she also turned out to have some quite based political views that made her. I think I seem to remember that she wrong-footed some of the usual,
Oh, really? We should get her on here, son.
Yes, absolutely. The bien-pensant, they were thrown. Anyway, the Sunday Express, Lewis.
Sunday Express. Good news in the Sunday Express. Minister jail post office bullies. And this is in the Express. Lock them up, says top Tory. The top Tory is Kevin Hollingrake.
Yeah.
Hollingrake.
Never heard of him.
I never heard of him either. And he says prison for post office chiefs who did the horrible thing that they did. And you know what? Prison for all of them. Tony Blair is walking free. Louis Schaefer's walking free. Put me in jail. This post office thing was so horrendous and goes so deeply against our British values of fair play.
You are integrated. Amazing.
No, I'm not integrated because I'm screaming. That's the part not integrated.
I think there is something about that, the British values to it, isn't there? It does feel like something has been... The decency has been trampled upon, and it just has become emblematic for a tendency that has just grown and grown over the last 20 or 30 years.
I totally agree. It is all about British decency. There's a cynical side of me that looks at this story and thinks, why did it take an ITV drama just a few weeks ago to highlight this when many people already knew the extent of this and have been banging the drum for quite some time? Even I think one of the computer magazines...
Computer Weekly,
that's right, was banging the drum on this. And it feels to me slightly cynical in the sense that, why has it taken this? What have we got to do? In order to highlight things, have we got to create ITV dramas?
Well, also, there is an election coming up, of course, and it's flared up. But I will say, I'm not entirely surprised that it's taken an ITV drama. If you have, like, a plane crash or a train crash or some people are murdered, it's always very easy to... It gets the blood up, the blood leads or whatever. But... these are... There was loss of life, there were suicides, and lives have been destroyed, but it's a very slow burn. It's widespread. It's people whose lives weren't particularly glamorous and then were suddenly brought down. When a celebrity, for instance, experiences some kind of tragedy, everyone immediately grasps that they've been shot down from a stratospheric altitude. But it's so mundane, and that, of course, is the poignancy of it when you see it brought to life so well as you did.
But not just the mundanity.
The mundanity.
The mundanity is the fact, and this is something that I've studied in this country because I didn't grow up with it, but there was a social contract in this country.
Yep.
That the people who are the betters, whatever you call betters, in America we don't have betters, but here they have betters.
Yeah.
The betters wouldn't screw the working people,
Yeah.
and the working people wouldn't kick up too much of a fuss. So everybody's saying it's okay. The fact is the betters in this country have screwed the working people.
I think there's something to that. The Telegraph, very briefly, Paul.
Yeah, so this is a Rwanda bill must be strengthened or we will kill it off, Tory Spartans warn. So this is the right of the Tory party, the three main groups, the leaders of the three biggest groups, the Conservative right, have united to warn Rishi Sunak that it needs to be full on, essentially.
Yeah.
And of course, if you're going to endeavour with this, it has to be. There's no half measures with something like this, because it has to be. The whole point of it, and we keep, I think, forget it in some of the rhetoric, is it's to be a deterrent. It's because those people who are trying to get in need to look and go, if I do that, I can end up just flying straight to Rwanda.
It's like a game of snakes and ladders in which every throw of the dice will land you on a snake, isn't it? That's what it has to basically be like.
Yes, exactly.
I've said snake because it's an anagram of Sunak. But there is something to that. You're absolutely right. And we've seen the cleverness of lawyers, liberal, progressive lawyers.
It's not an anagram of Sunak.
All right, phonetically. There's a whole class in this country now, the Good Law Project and all the rest of them, who will tie these things up in knots. The civil service are clearly opposed to the whole measure, that they will allow it to happen. If you give them so much as a squeak, that they will run with that, and they will prevent anything from actually happening.
It's the only thing that's ever made me think we should leave the ECHR.
Yeah. And do you want to talk about the beast from the north, Lewis, or should we go to the break?
Good news! Great news. Bad weather's coming. I mean,
you've been pre-disastered. You're all right. You've already had your lurgy.
You know, and everything. I'm trying to find good news everywhere. This is from a guy named Alistair Grant, who, according to his Twitter thing, calls himself the UK's top weather journalist. The Daily Star. You can look that up.
The Daily Star.
Daily Star. And he says it's cold and it's going to get colder. Brr.
Maybe it is going to get colder. I will say stock up on vitamin D. That will keep your spirits up. I've got to go to the break now, Lewis. Sorry, but that's it for part one. Stay tuned as we cover the pro-Palestine protests in London. Keir Starmer back in the Yemen bombing, and Taiwan electing a new anti-Chinese president. You won't want to miss that. See you in a couple of minutes.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel. Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Simon Evans, still here with Paul Cox and Lewis Schaefer. I've just realised, Paul Cox, that your name is the name of Paula Wilcox with the middle bit removed, isn't it?
Well, I've never ever thought of that.
Have you not? Because it's been bothering me for months now where I'd heard it before.
Really?
And that's what it is, yeah. You've just got the...
I've thought of 1,000 jokes about my name over the
out
years.
the middle of it, yeah.
Never...
Well, that's obviously a generation-dependent thing.
Maybe,
anyway.
I guess, yeah.
Probably lost half the audience at home anyway.
No,
the other half is
now,
making
Paul's
the tea.
name is an anagram for Lewis Schaefer.
Don't try and play that game. I'll walk all over you. The Observer, Paul, with our first story this evening. Familiar from previous Saturdays, I'm afraid. Thousands marching in our capital yet again.
Yes, The Observer. Thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters march in London. So there were a whole bunch of things going on today. There were 6 arrests made. There were 3 people arrested on suspicion of showing support for a prescribed organisation, by which they mean terrorist group, which is an offence under the Terrorism Act, while 2 arrests were made for offensive placards. Now, in the grand scheme of things, that's not a lot of numbers. No. But it is Saturday, which means it's protest day, and I, for one, support their right to waste as much of their time as they like. I don't think they're actually achieving anything at the moment. I know that sounds very sort of cynical, and I do support their right to protest, but I can't see anything being achieved other than a massive fuss.
Well, they're exhausting police budgets. That might come in handy one day.
And don't let anyone, by the way, tell you that this country isn't free, because hundreds of thousands of people can march on our capital city every weekend in support of people that would quite happily have every one of them killed. And I don't mean that lightly, because, you know, if you look at Hamas just in isolation, their doctrine is to wipe us out. The West, the Jews, whoever, gone.
They would say, most of these people, that they don't support Hamas, that they simply want there to be a ceasefire in Israel to stop killing innocent civilians.
I agree.
But then again, there are others who say that that can only be achieved by destroying Israel.
I think there's a sort of willful ignorance again involved in some of this, where, of course, we understand, you know, children, women in Palestine being killed, really bad stuff, OK? They did vote in Hamas, and Hamas did start the war. So to protest it and make out that Israel are entirely to blame is very disingenuous.
And some people did that, like, late evening on October the 7th, didn't they? Do you ever... you've had to speak on this on countless occasions, have you?
Yeah, because, I mean, I kind of agree with Paul, but we don't know what could happen for them. I mean, it seems like they're wasting their time, but they're not. On one hand, I could say that they're not helping their cause, because every single day goes on, people realize that I feel for the Palestinians, because they don't have support. They're not loved or liked. But, I mean, I have Palestinian
friends. And you mean by the people in that area of the world?
By their own neighbours, by the Egyptians, the Saudis.
Exactly. They're loved by students, they're loved by left-wing protesters all around the world, but nobody with power and nobody close by. Yeah.
As a nation. But Palestinians, many of them, I have a very good Palestinian friend, or I did, and they're good people, but you feel for them.
Yeah, I mean, they've got some little catchy ditties, haven't they? Yemen, Yemen, make us proud, turn another ship around. Now, you know, it's catchy, but the idea that we should be supporting the Houthi rebels is beyond me. I can't see what value that is. They associate the Houthis with supporting Hamas against Israel, or Palestine against Israel, i.e. against Israel. However, they're a terrorist group, not prescribed in this country yet, but I'm sure they will be soon. And they're just a proxy for Iran.
And there's plenty of other... There was a guy speaking who was filmed and shared on Twitter saying that we need to normalise massacres. And that was like with a microphone, and nobody intervened at that point. Anyway, Lewis, the independent Labour are not going to make the Yemen an election wedge issue by the look of it.
Yeah, well, it's Keir Starmer backs Yemen bombing and issues stern warning to terror sponsors Iran, and which is, I think, what he should do personally. But it's not completely on point. It can't be on point because there are lots of Labour people who are against it. But Keir Starmer wants to be elected prime minister. He wants his party to win. His foot is all the way down on the gas. If people know what that means, to have your foot on the gas.
Some of them out there could.
They're thinking it's a camping reference, probably. Yeah.
Just all the way down. But
I mean, to be fair to Starmer, he is exercising a degree of discipline over the party. Because you're right, there are the dissident left within his own party who would actually quite like to see him equivocate a bit more on this, probably.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you only got to look. I know he's not in the party anymore. You only got to look at Jeremy Corbyn, who essentially is a Labourite, but very, very far Labourite, and he's independent because of his views. Yeah. But all of his supporters largely vote Labour, and they'd have absolutely no action whatsoever. They would support the ceasefire. They would support... on October the 8th, they would have gone, look, can we just scrub over it?
I mean, I've got to say, at the time when accusations of anti-Semitism were levelled at Corbyn's shadow cabinet, building up to the 2019 election, I wondered if they were overplaying that a little bit, because there didn't seem to be very many obvious ways in which that would manifest itself in this country. I didn't genuinely believe that there'd be any kind of prejudicial legislation brought in against Jews in the UK. But the events that have taken place in the last 18 months or so, or certainly the last 6 months, have made you realise how Britain's position would be vastly different under a Corbyn government.
Every single one of Jeremy Corbyn's actions since September the 7th...
October the 7th.
October the 7th, sorry. Would make Jewish people uncomfortable, Jewish people in Britain especially uncomfortable. I mean, he's in South Africa now, supporting... Oh, sorry, he's in The Hague now, supporting South Africa...
In the International Court,
exactly. And whether he thinks he's doing that for the right reasons or not, that will be making Jewish people feel uncomfortable.
Of course. I mean, I suppose it needs saying that Keir Starmer's actions will be making a lot of Muslim people feel uncomfortable.
Well,
that is the nature of our multicultural nature. Lewis, Taiwan electing a troublemaker, at least according to the Chinese Communist Party.
Well, this is I don't know whether it's good news or bad news or just as news. As Taiwan elects this guy William Lai as president, champion of autonomy for China. There are three parties. One of them is the most pro-Taiwanese party, and China wants Taiwan back. A case could be made that Taiwan wants China back because Taiwan was just founded by dissident Chinese people.
That'd be a hell of a judo move.
It could.
Feel like an old droopy cartoon.
Make China great again.
Yeah. I think there are many people who are thinking that. The interesting thing about the Taiwanese that I have read is that more and more of the Taiwanese consider themselves Taiwanese and not Chinese.
Not Chinese in exile.
So what they're doing is it's bothering China, of course, but the biggest fear, here's the most important issue, is that the rumors are spread that America will not defend Taiwan strongly enough. But the truth is, America will defend Taiwan. We just do not give an unlimited, forever free bill of we're going to defend you forever. So we do leave countries. We gave Iraq 15, 20 years. We gave Afghanistan 15 years.
What they'd ideally like to see America would be something like the Ukraine-Russia situation, where you can support a war against your enemy without losing American life, right? And you know, they're quite happy to spend the money on it.
And we might even lose American lives to do it. That's not the problem.
I mean, if China invade Taiwan, then I think America would be entitled. I think the world would accept that it would be, you know, it was given that guarantee. It would be. They're not a member of NATO, but it would be a similar kind of scenario.
I think they remember the domino theory, which was in Vietnam, which is why we went into Vietnam, why America went into Vietnam, is because if Vietnam falls, then the Philippines falls, and Australia falls, and it all goes.
Yeah.
And so I think...
Can you imagine a communist Australia? That would have been quite interesting.
I'd like to see him try.
Well, they did have a fascist New Zealand for a while.
Did they? Really? I don't remember that. Wow.
Called Jacinta...
Jacinda, yeah. Well, to be fair, Australia actions under the COVID... Anyway, Paul, candidates are understandably rushing forward to be the next Toby Jones-led ITV drama to drive government compensation programmes.
Yes, indeed. So Rishi Sunak must now compensate infected blood scandal victims, politicians demand. So after the Prime Minister paved the way for hundreds of postmasters wrongly prosecuted by the Post Office to receive compensation, he has been told to roll out compensation to victims of the infected blood scandal. So, look, whilst I completely agree... Oh, by the way, the infected blood scandal was a huge story in the 70s and 80s, and they have been compensated directly, or their partners have been compensated up to about £100,000, I should say. So it's not like they haven't been compensated. And I fully support that compensation, as much as I fully support the Post Office compensation scheme also. But this is why governments push back. Yeah. Because there are a lot of worms in that tin. Yeah. And as soon as you let one out...
Domino effect.
The domino effect.
Yeah.
I thought you just meant a worm.
Yeah.
I get what you mean now, yeah.
He's a tin full of worms if ever I saw one. But, no, you're absolutely right, of course. And I will just say, incidentally, I totally support the idea that the victims of the Post Office scandal should be compensated. I don't entirely support the idea that they deserve £1 billion worth of taxpayers' money. I think they deserve £1 billion worth of Fujitsu's money. Yeah. That's who I think should be paying for it. Do you know what I mean? There are people who actually profited from this nonsense, you know.
And ministers who were given money while they were in power.
Yeah.
Can I make the most important point here? Is what this is more panic generating over little things causing diseases. The HIV causing AIDS is dubious.
Okay.
And I'm going to say there are many.
I can see ITV is beginning to cast you already. You've just given them the angle they need. You are not going to be Toby Jones, I can tell you that.
The last thing that I say on this thing is that I do not believe the AIDS/HIV narrative, that tiny little things cause disease.
OK, so you're saying that with the lurgy. That's quite brave. No, that's it for part two.
I'm not
Coming up,
little thing allergy. My lurgy is caused by exhaustion, by having a girlfriend home for 2 weeks.
Can we just bring Lewis's mic down for a moment? That's it for part two. Coming up, we have a human behavioural crisis, trauma in the metaverse, and Clarkson taking aim at Stephen Fry. See you in a couple of minutes.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Infected blood.
Welcome back to Headliners. So, Lewis, the Observer have news of the behavioural crisis that is undermining attempts to eliminate the human race.
Oh my God! Didn't I tell you I don't want to talk about these kind of stories? This is a typical Sunday story. It's in the Observer. It's a long piece by a guy who wrote a paper. His name is Joseph Mertz. Which is a funny name because it was that guy Fred and Ethel Mertz, who were the neighbors and the honeymooners in America. Jackie Lee said.
Oh, okay.
So it was considered a funny name even in America in the 1950s. The Mertz.
What does he work for, Lewis?
He works. Would you stop it? He works for the Mertz Institute.
Oh, so it's totally impartial. Go on, carry on.
An institution that researches. Basically, he says there's huge climate change, and we got to do something about climate change because there are too many people, and we've got to eliminate. These climate change people, they hate. Basically, they're not climate change. They're using the excuse of so-called climate change to kill us. They want you dead. They want Louis Shea. They want my friend Paul, and even Simon, who hates my guts.
So he's talking about 3 levers of overshoot, which is an interesting expression: consumption, waste, and population. Now, consumption and waste, obviously, I understand that, is basically saying that we extract more from the earth than it can afford to give it eventually. So you either consume it or you waste it, and that, I understand, those are the 2 halves of what's extracted.
No. Well, explain that to me. Explain how you can take more from the earth. Are we going to use
he's saying the current
doesn't exist anymore? There's no.
Yeah, the current.
There's a big hole in the earth. That we've used too much of the earth? That the earth is going to disappear because we've used too much of it?
His theory, I don't know whether you would accept it or agree with it, but I'm presumably he's produced some evidence to support it, is that we currently need 1.7 Earths to maintain the consumption of resources at the current level. And people have been talking about this. I know they've overstretched, the Club of Rome and so on, create a fear about whether we're going to run out of oil or whether we're going to run out of food. India was supposed to have gone through starvation decades ago. And, of course, we've always just in time invented new fertilisers, or we've invented new forms of energy and so on. We just keep pace with it. But there is I understand, a conceivable proposition that the extent of consumption that's been popular in the West for some decades now, if you were to roll that out around the Earth and all the people of the Earth were to expect to run cars and enjoy central heating and air conditioning at the level that we've got used to, that would take more resources than is available.
You think?
Here's my point. His 3rd one is population. He is actually actively talking about depopulation.
Exactly. OK, let's pick one of those 3. You pick the first one. I'll just defend the first one. The first one is we've got an unlimited amount of oil practically in this country. We're hundreds, if not thousands of years away from using all the oil. And so what if we use all the oil? It doesn't mean the earth is going to disappear. We'll just have fewer people because then there won't be enough food. So we will just shrink naturally. We don't have to worry about it.
What do you think, Paul? Behavioural crisis, sinister?
I think, first of all, I think the Earth's going to be fine. I'm not worried about the Earth. It's humans. No. I mean, this idea that people are worried about the Earth, I find fascinating because they're actually worried about themselves.
They like to put it in those terms.
Yeah, they have to in order to achieve what they want to achieve.
Synecdoche, I think
they've taken a very good philosophy, i.e., give what you take what you give, with the Earth and the resources that it offers, and they've turned it into a whopping great bat to beat us all up with.
Right.
And this is where I start to lose faith with it. Should I say? He says we need to become more mindful of the way we are being manipulated. I agree with him, just not in the way he intends it to us. I think we are being manipulated a lot of the time. He talks about overshoot, so that anything we do is never quite going to be good enough. And for this kind of person and doctrine and ideology, things are never going to be enough. So it doesn't matter what you do. If you achieve... Let's just take ULEZ, for instance. At the moment, if your car's over 2015, you're all right. Let's get to a point in London where every car user is ULEZ compliant. You're telling me then they're just going to stop charging people?
No, of course not.
Exactly. So that's what's going to happen.
It's going to be like USB sockets. As soon as you have them installed around the house, they'll change the shape of them.
So I'm quite cynical about this, and I believe that it's just another attempt to control us.
We've got to move on. Sorry, Lewis, we've got to move on this one. But the evil billionaire or philanthropy news now in the Sunday Times, Paul, Larry Ellison is bankrolling Tony Blair's drive for transhumanist cryogenics.
Yeah, what a cuddly pair these two are.
Yeah.
Tony Blair's think tank, given £200 million by tech billionaire, as you say, Larry Ellison of Oracle, is bankrolling the former PM's think tank, which advises on global healthcare and government reform. And Tony Blair has called it the Institute of Global Changes, which again is quite terrifying. I mean, it's all in the title, isn't it? Globe change. They all want to control the world in some way. And let's park for a moment the personalities involved. Why would a billionaire philanthropist and one of the world's most manipulative, well-known political leaders, why would they want to combine? Is it for our own good? Question mark. I'm not convinced it is. I think it's for their own ends to some degree. And it does. Whenever I see a story like this, I always think to myself, why do they want to do this? Why do they want everybody to do the same thing?
Well, it's the same. It's all part of the thing, and Lewis has talked about it before. Funny enough, I was listening to a book on the way in. I will tell you exactly what it's called. It is called Return of the Strong Gods by somebody called R.R. Reno, and he is starting out with the post-war consensus, Karl Popper and so on, basically saying that things like nationalism and any kind of way of organising politics around a metaphysics, such as, ideals or the spirit of a people, has to be done away with because that led to the world wars, and instead we move, he doesn't use the term yet, to a sort of technocratic kind of mindset, Karl Popper and so on, the open society, essentially saying that we need to look at the Earth and its population being governed as if it was, human resources, essentially, rather than any kind of a people seeking its own actualisation. And that's essentially what we're seeing as now, right? Economic units.
Well, what we're seeing, because the phrase that Louis Schaefer uses is Team World, and Tony Blair is Mr. Team World.
Yeah.
And he's getting $200 million from this guy Ellison, who's Mr. Oracle guy, and I googled how much money the guy's got. He's got, according to Wikipedia, he's got 135 billion.
Yeah.
So 200 million is like...
Oh, it's in a way, it's almost insultingly little, yeah. But I don't think he's bankrolling anything else to a greater extent.
No, he's been friends with Tony Blair for a long time.
Yeah,
Tony Blair was Prime Minister when they struck up the relationship, and he's basically bankrolled a lot of Tony Blair's
activities.
It's
an interesting one, isn't it, Oracle? It's the third most profitable software and sort of computer company, and yet I doubt many of us have ever bought an Oracle product or even know. I assume it goes. Oh, have you?
In the past, when I used to be an electronic test engineer,
right.
So I worked on software systems.
I assume they create huge systems for companies rather than.
It exists in industry, not so much in personal.
Anyway, as you say, fourth or fifth most wealthy man in the world, and yet slightly more anonymous than they.
Point out how Paul is like humble bragging by mentioning that he has had a job.
And you could possibly get in touch with Ellison and just touch him for a couple of grand. Lewis, just when you think Meta couldn't get any verse, the Daily Mail have a follow-up on virtual sexual assault story.
Yeah, this is horrible. It's exclusive. I was gang in the metaverse. The trauma was similar to real-world assault. This woman is saying that bad things happen online, and they're just because this virtual reality headsets, and it's something that happened to her. Her name is Nina Patel. Something that happened to her in 2021, and it's now 2023. So this is hardly news. 2024. That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
You've been ill since 23. I know how it is.
It's another example of how a woman cannot take responsibility.
I do think, and well, I will say this: there's a big photograph of her in this story, looking very attractive and well presented, which is not, to say. I mean, it's in the metaverse, so that doesn't matter. But she's kind of presenting herself as a very sort of, I don't know. It feels like she's talking herself into this story a little bit. Do you know what I mean? I read the story, I read her account of it. I've never been on the metaverse, because this is not just like a kind of, you know, on a screen. This is like you put on the virtual reality goggles and you live in this world. And I can see the appeal of it for people such as myself. Sometimes you spend a day working at home. You think, wouldn't it be nice to be in a virtual office and have some virtual friends around? Yeah. They might actually even be people you really know in the real world or whatever. Yeah. And then into this space come 3 or 4 male avatars, as they're called, and start crowding her, apparently. There's a limit to how much they can do, obviously, as an avatar on avatar, but there's a sense that they're crowding around her, and some of the banter is of a distinctly sort of invasive and, you know, off-colour nature. Well, it's unpleasant. I mean, I don't know how the metaverse can kind of police this sort of thing, but to say that it is remotely similar to an actual physical sexual assault, I mean, how would she feel? How would anyone feel if she were actually to say that to the face of somebody who had been sexually assaulted in real life?
Oh, you're right to be emotive about this, Simon. Absolutely. Unlike real sexual assault, in this environment, you can just turn off.
It's gone.
And it's gone. I'm not suggesting for a minute it's not unpleasant behaviour, but let's not forget this is in the realm of video games, where people are killing and shooting each other minute after minute after minute. The thing that's different about this is victimhood has become a very valuable commodity. Yeah. And I, again, this sounds very cynical, and I'm sure this person's lovely, but I feel like she's used this to her own gain.
I'm afraid that's exactly what it smacks of to me. We'll get one more story in before the break. Observer now, Paul, the cycle of life. When we die, our bodies become the grass, and the antelope eats the grass. Meanwhile... That's a little bit of a life lesson I learned from watching a film a few years ago. I can't remember which one. In the meanwhile, green parks make strong bones. So it's a full cycle.
I got so engrossed in what you were saying. I'd forgotten about the story.
I wish I could do the voice. Mufasa.
That's right, yeah.
When we die, Simba, our bodies become the grass, and the antelope eat the grass.
Oh, that was an actual something.
Yeah, that's from The Lion King. Do you not recognise it?
No, I missed The Lion.
Everything the grass touches, Simba.
You've got to learn how to do Mufasa. Women melt.
I never saw the thing.
I'll take the story. Just it doesn't seem right. Children living near green spaces have stronger bones. So children with more green spaces near their homes have significantly stronger bones, a study has found, potentially leading to lifelong health benefits. And this study is the first of its kind, largely because everybody's known this for a very long time.
If anyone out there does not know it, it's the single best thing you can do for your kids is to drop them off at the park and leave them there for a few hours. At least once a day.
A few hours. Drop them off at the park and sleep.
They will come back with loads more calcium. Anyway, that's part 3 done. Coming up with how University Challenge went viral on the rave scene, and a TikTok traveller cries over French people speaking French in France. See you in a couple of minutes.
Leave them.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel. every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. So the Observer now, Paul, on the University Challenge scandal. I hate to say it, but I'm afraid I'm in this one.
Are you?
Very slightly, but go on, do the story first.
Are you
I'll
really?
explain.
I didn't realise that. We need jungle, I'm afraid. How the University Challenge went viral on the rave scene. So a quote from Amal Rajan, host of the highbrow British quiz. I didn't write that. That's what's written here. Has inspired a stream of samples in tracks and innovations to perform live. So this
we're going to have a look at the clip,
yeah,
actually,
okay,
Paul.
yeah,
I think they got it.
If we do. Hey.
What name is given to the genre of dance music that developed in the UK in the early 1990s out of the rave scene and reggae sound system culture associated with acts such as a guy called Gerald and Goldie?
Drum and bass.
I can't accept drum and bass. We need jungle, I'm afraid.
That was the iconic phrase.
So the fact that they're sampling it does remind me of a friend of ours, probably, Marcus Brigstock. He had a sitcom, or he was writing on a sitcom called Barking, I think it was, about 20 years ago. And there was a scene of him in the cockpit with a co-pilot, and the other co-pilot says, "Do you smoke?" He says, "I don't smoke cigarettes, I don't smoke cigars, I don't smoke the pipe, and I don't smoke the reefer." And they just sampled that.
Right.
And they actually made a dance hit out of it, to the point that the writers of Barking, including Marcus, I think actually managed to get some royalties in the end.
So you think Amel might be in for something?
Yeah, he could be in for some royalties.
I saw this on the Twitter and I responded to it and got a reply from Amel, so I was quite proud of because I love that show. I've never met him, no. I love that University Challenge. We watched that episode and I thought it was very harsh because I don't think there is a significant difference between drum and bass and jungle. It's a very narrow difference,
God,
to be honest.
Me either, but I'm pretty sure there's some hardcore fans out there.
Well, I've asked a few people on Twitter and nobody's come up with a really plausible decision. It's not. I can understand if you said house and techno, for instance, or that.
Yeah.
And who created? They had already answered who created house with Fatboy Slim, which is unforgivable. I mean, that's 2 decades out.
I was going to say it happened in the late 80s in New York, I think.
Yeah, but
I resent is you don't ask me.
Go on, Lewis. Go on. What do you got to say?
I wrote my PhD thesis on the difference between those two.
Did you really?
No, I did not. Of course I didn't.
Were you ever into it? I went to Metalheads a couple of times.
So I
King's Cross.
was a big house fan,
right?
And house was and jungle was kind of a mix of reggae and house. I might be doing it a disservice. So it was too much for me. Like techno was too much for me.
Yeah.
I once went to see the Chemical Brothers live, and about 30 minutes, even though I'm only 18, I was like, this is done my head in.
Jungle, though, because it was accelerated beats, basically, just so fast that it almost just became a flat surface again.
Phenomenal. I don't know what they called it. I don't know.
Anyway, good for Amel Rajan for putting his stamp on the new job. Michael Gove now, Lewis, in the Mail, using the expression gentle densification, which
notice that?
Sounds a bit more like slow-acting Viagra than
this is Michael Gove, who is the levelling up secretary, who should be, it's atrocious, that name. Residents will be able to make their homes up to 7 stories tall under Michael Gove's new plans for local street referendums. What they want to do is they want to build buildings, because that's what this country is all about. This is just this country has become one big real estate scheme. The Labour want to densify the cities. The Conservatives want to densify the countryside. It's all giving money into the dirty, industrial, team world.
But wouldn't you say there would be quite a lot of benefit, what do you think, Paul, to densification of the suburbs of like 2 or 3 story townhouses into 4 or 5 story townhouses?
No, I'm much more cynical about it than that, actually. I think this is saying, tell us we've got a population crisis without telling us we've got a population crisis.
No.
But I think we do. You tell me I'm wrong when I'm finished.
Okay, sorry.
Be quick, because we've got 1.5 minutes left.
I just think this is enabling us to build more, which maybe overcomes a problem but doesn't stop a problem.
No, fair enough.
Doesn't overcome a problem. There's no housing crisis.
But there are an awful lot of streets that are 2-story, fairly banal houses that would be better 3, 4, 5 stories.
Better for who?
Well, you know, brings in that kind of Amsterdam kind of vibe.
No.
I like it.
I wouldn't have a problem with that.
No. OK, we'll get one more story in quickly. My life as a dog and other animals, Paul.
Oh, cool. Yes, of course.
Daily Star.
Yes. Sorry about that. Man who became dog inspired those who want to live as birds and gorillas, Insider says. And It's not even meant as a pun, because he is inside a costume. The company who made this incredibly realistic...
So realistic.
Yeah, I mean, look at that. Tell me you don't think that's a dog. That is a man
that
in
is
a dog
trans
costume.
dog. Trans dogs are dogs.
Look, that is
I've got to say, I don't know what his back legs are doing. That is quite impressive in that respect.
Yes, yeah. I mean, there's no scale there. I assume he's on all fours. He's not stood up just at the front of it.
I think his knees are where the udders would be, but...
Do dogs have udders?
I still don't know whether he lives like a collie in all respects.
Like you mentioned, that this story is basically one of those typical GB News anti-trans stories.
There we go. The show is nearly over. Let's take another quick look at Sunday's front pages. Mail on Sunday, farce of gangster gunman we cannot deport. The Sunday Times, Venables given CBE despite Horizon fears. I think we knew that. The Sunday Telegraph, UK ready to strike Houthis again, says Cameron. The Observer, Red Sea crisis could shatter economic recovery hopes. The Sunday Express, Minister jail post office bullies. And the Daily Star, it's going to be a cold one. The beast of the north is on its way. Well, that's all we have time for. Thank you to my guests, Paul Cox and Lewis Schaefer. We're back tomorrow, when Nick Dixon will be joined by Jonathan Cogan and Leo Kearse. That will be a riot. If you're watching at 5 a.m, stay tuned for breakfast. Otherwise, thank you for joining us. Good night.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. I'm Jonathan Vautry here of a GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. We've got a mixture of variable cloud and some clear spells to end this first half of the weekend, and that is quite key in terms of what conditions you will see overnight. Where you do see some of those clearer spells, temperatures could just drop off a touch with some pockets of frost developing, mist and fog patches as well. But those areas that hold on to the cloud will probably see temperatures just hold up slightly above freezing. Many of our towns and cities around 1 or 2 degrees Celsius. So not a widespread frost, but still a chilly start to Sunday morning. A reasonable amount of cloud holding on for Wales, central southern England throughout Sunday as well. A few sunnier breaks to watch out for, but it's the northern half of the UK where we'll see some slightly more prolonged areas of sunshine. Showers, though, across northern Scotland will be falling as snow, even to lower levels. Combine that with some very strong winds across the northeast. They've got the risk of drifting snow and feeling very bitter in those winds, even towards the south. A fairly cold day, 6-7 degrees Celsius. But it's that very cold Arctic air in the north that's going to sweep its way southwards over the course of Sunday and into Monday. There's blue colours covering the entirety of the UK. So some of us will certainly have to scrape the cars the first thing on Monday morning. The showers will be continuing to push their way into the north, primarily from northern Scotland, but we'll see also some snow showers for Northern Ireland, perhaps a few for the far west of Wales, southwest England, as well as skirting into Humberside and parts of Norfolk as well. Further inland, widespread blue skies, but feeling very cold, and the cold conditions continue right.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with